Hello and welcome in once again to the week 6 this time waiver wire show here at 444 Fantasy Football on a Monday morning, or technically a noontime if you live on the East Coast. My name is Matt Okada. I am the host here. This is going to be a good one. We've got some fun names at the top and then some familiar names at the bottom, and then some Q&A at the end. So if you have questions, if you are wondering who to add this week, or if you're wondering whether to make that trade, throw those in the YouTube or Twitter chats, and I will get to them after we get through the top 5 ads. Week 5, mostly in the books. It was a banger. I feel like this could just be, my gut, but I bet you if somebody did a data dive, they would prove this out to be true. I feel like we had more touchdowns, good games, good finishes this week, good fantasy players than we have like all the rest of the year combined, because feels like a messy year. And this was a great week. Tons of good games from the players we actually care about. Felt like there wasn't that much craziness from some random player who now has to make the waiver wire, though there is one player at the top who has ascended very quickly. But without any further ado, let's just get into these waiver ads. So, number one priority on the week is the man I just hinted at. It is Darnell Mooney, wide receiver for the Atlanta Falcons, in case you didn't know, which you should because they played in prime time on Thursday night. And goodness gracious, did Darnell Mooney have a game. He had already been pretty solid entering week 5. 3 straight games with 6 or more targets for Mooney prior to Thursday Night Football. And he looked like essentially a strong number 2 to Drake London in Atlanta. Then on Thursday, when Kirk Cousins ended up throwing about 80 gazillion passes, it was actually 58 to be exact. Mooney saw 16 targets and caught 9 of them for 105 yards and 2 touchdowns, and looks more like a 1B to London's 1A, or maybe even vice versa, than a number 2 on this team. They obviously brought him in free agency along with bringing in Kirk Cousins. And while Drake London feels to be the, big-bodied touchdown guy and did get a ton of targets and was very effective in this game, 13 targets, 12 catches, 154 yards for London, Mooney has been getting arguably more consistent and more consistently valuable targets, because he is almost always being targeted somewhere deepish, intermediate to deepish down the field. It's been amazing. And Kirk Cousins and Mooney clearly have a connection, a very strong one, good chemistry. They're linking up downfield in ways that mean Mooney doesn't need a ton of targets to have some good games now and then, but he's actually getting good enough consistent targets that it matters. And amidst all of this, it looks like Kirk Cousins is getting properly healthy and clicking into this offense. Obviously, they started the year off against the Steelers. That was really tough. He looked awful, and we all thought, oh my gosh, he's a statue. His year is shot. His career might be over. He's not healed, blah, blah, blah. He's gotten, feels like, steadily better since then, to the point of Thursday Night Football when he threw 58 passes for 509 yards and 4 touchdowns in an overtime win. I think that the offense might be unlocked. We're going to need a few more weeks to really know that for sure, of consistent, strong play. But if it is unlocked to the degree where a lot of us expected when Kirk Cousins was brought to this roster, including Atlanta, obviously, that they could be a true top-tier, high-flying offense with a good quarterback and the weapons that they have, Mooney now being, an added but suddenly one of the primary weapons. We're looking at really, really good stuff down the stretch for everybody involved. So, because of both the target share and the air yards share, I'm heavily investing on Darnell Mooney here. In the waiver wire column, which you can check out on 4for4.com, I suggested 16 to 20% of your fab. If you are in a rough situation, a wide receiver, you're dealing with injury or something like that, I would not even hesitate to go higher than that. Up to even 30% plus could be doable for Darnell Mooney if you think that's what it's going to take to get him. He's rostered in 48% of Yahoo leagues, so he's maybe only available in about half of the leagues you all are playing in. But if he's out there, he is the number one priority ad. Absolutely must be done. All right, let's go to number 2. Number 2 is a fresh off Sunday Night Footballs. 2 prime timers here to start. Rico Dowdle. I will be honest with you all. Entering Thursday night or Sunday Night Football, I wasn't that hyped on having Rico Dowdle in this column. I had a slot waiting for him because I write this article through Sunday Night Football essentially, and it gets published in the morning. I had a slot ready for him, but I wasn't too confident on what the priority would be. And then he was amazing and has been very good now for a couple weeks running. Essentially has scored, there was 1 week where he scored like a decimal less than the week prior. But other than that, he's essentially scored more fantasy points each successive week this season from week 1 up to week 5. And that culminated in last night's performance. 114 scrimmage yards, another receiving touchdown, which he also had the week prior, 20 carries for 87 yards, 2 catches for 27 yards, and that touchdown. He is clearly far and away the better running back in Dallas, and Dallas, for the most part, has recognized that. Now, I will say he has still managed to stay at or below 50% of the snaps all year. Ezekiel Elliott, for some reason, they insist on giving him snaps, but they're not giving him meaningful touches. Last night, he had 6 carries for 17 yards and didn't even have they had 1 target, but didn't even have a catch. So it feels almost like ceremonial, these snaps they're giving Ezekiel Elliott, and maybe they'll continue to phase them out. But even if they don't, Rico Dowdle is playing like a low-end RB2, high-end RB3, with Zeke getting the half of the snap share. I think that it is going to be the case that with Dowdle cementing his clear hold on the lead back role in terms of touches, he will begin to establish a lead back type of snap share. And if that goes up, the touches will follow even more. It should give him more opportunity for pass catching work, which he's been very efficient with. He is probably the least rostered RB1 in all of fantasy, maybe. Rostered in 56% of Yahoo leagues, so it's not like he's, widely available. He should be available in nearly half of your leagues. If he is, he absolutely must be added. I will also add the Cowboys have had a tough schedule to start the year, particularly, again, in terms of defense and run defenses that they've faced. It should get a little better moving forward, although they have the Lions next week, which is another really tough one, unfortunately. And it would help Dowdle a lot if this offense as a whole could get properly on track. They've seemed kind of askew for a couple weeks now. It certainly doesn't help that CeeDee Lamb is not getting involved as he should. So if the offense gets going as they should, Dowdle will be could be certainly an RB2 rest of season. Will be close to that if not. So add him if he's available. I would consider trading for him if he's not on waiver wires as well. Obviously, he just had a good game. Maybe you wait a couple days for that to fade away. But he has not, posted RB2 numbers all year. But I think he could be one rest of season. All right, let's go to number 3. Number 3 is Tank Bigsby, another running back who we've talked about in previous columns several times. I am tempted to complain about my previous efforts to get Tank Bigsby added to little effect. because he is still only 22% rostered, despite being, I believe, in the column for like 4 weeks running and in this show for 2 or 3 weeks running. So let's fix this week, everybody. Please go and add Tank Bigsby. Week 5, he ripped off a 65-yard run, a 19-yard touchdown run, and a 28-yard reception. He has really essentially established himself as one of the most explosive players in the league, and particularly at the running back position. Through these first 5 games, he is averaging 8 yards per carry, which is highest among qualified rushers, and he's averaging 1.2 fantasy points per touch, which is far more efficient, more than 60% more efficient than Travis Etienne at 0.7 fantasy points per touch. Now, they're not replacing Travis Etienne with Tank Bigsby. They're not giving Tank Bigsby a bell cow role as long as Travis Etienne is there. But I will say a couple things. One, Etienne was banged up this week. He still saw, heavy work, but he was dealing with a shoulder injury. Maybe there will be some continued lingering stuff there, and that makes Tank Bigsby one of the best handcuffs in fantasy. Additionally, by the way, Etienne only saw 6 carries in this game. Additionally, it's maybe not impossible that they are shifting towards having Etienne as a pass catcher primarily and giving Bigsby the primary rush workload. That's certainly how it looked on Sunday. Bigsby had 13 carries. Etienne only had the 6, and then Etienne had 6 catches on 7 targets. Bigsby did still have 1 target and caught it for 28 yards, as mentioned, but not the same receiving workload. And Bigsby took those 13 carries for 101 yards. That's 7.8 yards per carry, and 2 touchdowns. Etienne, his 6 carries went for 17 yards, which is 2.8 yards per carry. So that's not very good. It's looking like, I mean, it's clear that Tank Bigsby is the most efficient runner. It's looking like he also might be used more in the red zone, and he's just the more like prototypical back. Again, Etienne's not going to get phased out completely of this offense unless he gets traded, which there was an interesting report, I believe it was from Jeremy Fowler, that said that maybe some teams would reach out looking to pick up Etienne, who's in a contract year, and the Jaguars have been terrible. They did obviously manage to win on Sunday, but it was against the Colts, and they barely won. Literally a 17 seconds left field goal. If Etienne does get moved, obviously Tank Bigsby becomes potentially an RB1. But even if he doesn't, and Etienne gets relegated to a receiving role, that makes Bigsby an RB2. And even if that doesn't happen, and Etienne is just what he's been most of the year, Bigsby is still a weekly flex play, bye-week spot starter, and one of, if not the best backup and handcuff in the league. So he should be rostered in 100% of leagues, not 22%. Let's please fix that. Everybody go out, check your waiver wire for Tank Bigsby, and if he's there, add him. Unless you're in an 8-team league or have like 5 RB2s on your bench, you should have room for Tank Bigsby. Feel free to throw in chat, should I drop this good running back for Tank Bigsby? And I'll probably say yes, if they're a legitimate droppable running back. All right, let's go to number 4, Jakobi Meyers. Is it number 4? It is number 4. Counting is great. Jakobi Meyers is all of a sudden a very, very high priority wide receiver ad. Why? Well, because Davante Adams has reportedly played his last snap in Las Vegas. He has wanted out, and it sounds like the team is working very hard to get him out. Now, the main roadblock there is any other team going to be willing to pay what the Raiders want for Davante Adams, which is supposedly a second-round pick plus. I don't know. The Jets certainly should be interested in doing that. I think the Bills should be interested in doing that. The Steelers reportedly are interested in doing that, though I don't know if that will be the case. So more likely than not that Devontae Adams gets moved. If he doesn't get moved, I really don't know what's going to happen here because they've both sides have essentially made it clear that they don't want to, be together anymore. This is a mutual breakup at this point. But if he gets moved, which he should, Jacoby Myers becomes very clearly the number one wide receiver on that team. We saw it again this past week. He had 6 catches on 9 targets for 72 yards with Devontae Adams out. That feels like pretty much exactly the stat line we should be projecting for Jacoby Myers. Rest of season if Devontae Adams is out. So, moreover, he is actually like a good wide receiver. We saw that in New England for a long time. We've seen it in stretches with Las Vegas. He is an effective receiver when he gets the targets, and he's now getting those targets. It's worth noting he's not the number one target on the team because Brock Bowers is still here and elite, apparently, and the top target. He was the most targeted and highest producing receiver this past week with Adams out. If you have him on your roster, congratulations. He's probably a league winner, especially with Adams leaving. But it's also worth noting that Myers was good this past week, even with Bowers getting the lead work. And there will be some weeks where defenses focus in on taking Bowers out of the picture more than Myers or anybody else. And in those weeks, Myers could even have a little bit more upside. He's the kind of guy in this offense, the way they've been throwing the ball all year with no one else of note, that he could have, 15 target games every now and then. So he's rostered in a little over half of Yahoo leagues. Once again, may not be available, but go take a look. He should be rostered in 100%, and he could be a really, really nice ad for you down the stretch with Devontae Adams headed out of town. I have him at 6 to 7% of your fab bid, so you're not blowing your entire budget or anything like that, but a worthy ad. Number 5, the last one, or is there a sneaky number 6? Tease. Number 5 is Bucky Irving. I really don't need to say much here. Well, at least I don't to anyone who's been around for this waiver wire pod or read my column over the past, I believe, month, because Bucky Irving has been very near the top of it for that entire stretch. Yet he still has not hit 60% rostership. He's at 57%. So I'm contractually obligated to include him here and in the column once again. Even in a relatively poor outing last Thursday night, Irving had double-digit touches. He remains efficient and involved in this offense. I'm not going to go into this much more. I've done it many, many weeks running now. Just know that if he's available, which he is in nearly half of your leagues, he must be added. He needs to be rostered in all leagues. He has league-winning upside down the stretch. Flexible play, even when Rachaad White is good and healthy, which he is currently. But if something happens to White, Bucky Irving could be a league winner. So please tuck him away on your benches. And sneaky number 6 is basically everything I just said, but repeated, copied, and pasted onto Braylon Allen, who once again has been a mainstay in this column, but remains heavily available, even more so than Bucky Irving, rostered at only 48% of Yahoo leagues. He's the top handcuff in fantasy. I know I've said that a couple guys so far are pretty close to that. Bigsby and Irving are both in the conversation, but I think just number 1 overall in terms of if the lead guy goes down, this guy becomes an RB1. It would be Braylon Allen. And again, like Irving, like Bigsby, he is still putting up some useful games, even with the starter healthy. So please get these guys at least up to like 70, 80% rostered so that I can stop mentioning them in the column and in the waiver show. Tank Bigsby, Bucky Irving, Braylon Allen, get them on your rosters. That was a sneaky number 6 because Rico Dowdle was a late ad. So he got stuffed in and we got to throw in another name. Okay, those are the top priorities. If you want to see the rest of the waiver priorities, my entire list with every position and the list that you should be adding in. The fab you should be bidding on every single guy. Go to 4for4.com/plans. Use promo code YouTube for 25% off, and that will make you a premium 4for4 subscriber. And you can read the entire article, which is somewhere between 3,500 and 4,500 words every week. It is so much goodness, and you should be taking advantage of it so that I feel better about writing it every Sunday night. Let's get to some Q&A. Once again, if you are in a chat and you've got a question, drop it in here. Waiver wire stuff, trade stuff. Is this player droppable rest of season stuff? Well, there is a drop list, by the way, in the waiver wire column. So if your guy shows up on there, you should definitely drop him. Let's kick it off with Chisel. Am I stupid for considering this trade? Trading away BTJ, that's a tough start because good gracious, do I not want to be trading away BTJ. Trading away BTJ, that's Brian Thomas Jr., Terry McLaurin, and J.K. Dobbins to receive Garrett Wilson and Michael Pittman. Yes, absolutely, you are stupid. No, you're not necessarily stupid, but I am not doing that. I legitimately would consider Brian Thomas Jr. over Michael Pittman Jr. at this point. And we're not far, especially with Devontae Adams to Jets rumors swirling, from me saying that I'd rather have Brian Thomas Jr. than Garrett Wilson. I know that sounds insane, but Brian Thomas Jr. has been unbelievable. One of, just on a per target basis, the best wide receivers in the league so far. He should earn more targets the way he's been playing, and he has been earning a few more targets the way he's been playing. But legitimately, go watch his tape, go look at his efficiency numbers, and you will see one of the best wide receivers in the league right now. It's crazy. He's been incredibly efficient and incredibly productive, even for fantasy on the lower targets. While talking, I had to pull up the overall fantasy numbers. This surprised even me. I was hyping him up the entire minute that I worked to pull up these numbers, and I did not expect this. Garrett Wilson is wide receiver 19, 56 half PPR fantasy points on the year. That is not bad at all. Michael Pittman Jr., well, I can't find him because he's so low. He is wide receiver 40 with 40.8 fantasy points per year. Brian Thomas Jr. is the wide receiver 7 with 70 fantasy points on the year. What you should be doing, if you're not Card Chisel, is going and trading for Brian Thomas Jr., offering Garrett Wilson and Michael Pittman Jr. to get Brian Thomas Jr. and Terry McLaurin and J.K. Dobbins, because clearly it is a doable thing, or at least it will make the manager think. And that's because Brian Thomas Jr. is a rookie. He hasn't gotten, 10 targets a game. He's been doing his damage on relatively low target involvement for most of the season. Just this past week, it was 8 targets against the Colts. He took that for 5 catches, 122, and a touchdown. So that's the kind of thing we're getting from Brian Thomas Jr. And it should only get better as the season goes on. So, no offense, Card Chisel, but this is a very, very terrible trade. Do not trade away Brian Thomas Jr. at all. Certainly not for that return. Combat Cash Club says, I have Singletary. Should I drop Dontavian Wicks for Tyrone Tracy Jr.? It depends, I would say, Combat Cash Club, on whether you would be starting Wicks. I'm guessing not, because it sounds like he's probably the most droppable player on your team in order to pick up Tyrone Tracy. Christian Watson should be back relatively soon, and if and when he is, Wicks should go back to being what he was, which is an every once in a while boom play, but not really that great overall. Also, he got 7 targets, which was actually the team high in week 5, but only had 2 catches for 20 yards, which is super discouraging. The targets are good. The air yards share is good with Christian Watson out, but if he's not going to turn them into points, that doesn't really help us. And when Watson returns, which should be a couple weeks, he goes back to being pretty much unusable. and theoretically less valuable than having the very productive, as we saw this past week, handcuff to Devin Singletary. Honestly, what I will say is I'm not super excited about Tracy or Wicks right now. I'd rather get one of the guys mentioned in this show, but if they're all rostered and if the other names in the waiver wire column ahead of Tyrone Tracy and Octavian Wicks are rostered, then I'd be okay making a move like this. Primarily, once again, if you're not starting Wicks regularly or at all. And so the upside handcuff of Tracy is more useful. Tyler Sperry says, would you guys drop Dell? And then asks the chat when I was not quick to answer because I was still in the waiver wire section. No, Tyler Sperry, absolutely not. And Combat Cash Club actually jumped in with a useful bit of answer here saying, don't drop Dell. Nico Collins is going to miss time due to a hamstring injury. Now, I will say to slightly maybe throw some water on Combat Cash Club's answer. I don't know that Tank Dell is going to, that Nico Collins is going to miss significant time. He apparently injured his hamstring on the play where he had like a 67-yard touchdown bomb, and then was celebrating and jogged off the field and then went to the tent and then went to the locker room. So it's kind of odd. Don't know when exactly in that series of events he tweaked his hamstring, but yes, he has a hamstring injury. Those can linger. And Tank Dell was immediately involved for the Texans when Nico Collins went out. He had 4 targets for 4 catches, 38 yards. I'm pretty sure, just based on what I was watching, that those all happened after Tank Dell left. Don't quote me on that. But he looked pretty involved. Also had a rush, although it wasn't effective. So you're not dropping Tank Dell, certainly not now if you've been holding him. This could be the best time of year to have him. He may be startable for the next couple of weeks if Nico Collins misses time. Zoaro19 commented, I believe, to the Combat Cash or to the Carchisel trade. BTJ is only getting better and it seems like you have enough wide receivers, so why get rid of a good RB for none in return? That is correct. Agreed with you, Zoaro19. Jesse Driscoll says, is it safe to say we don't know what the heck's going to happen week to week? Mason was ranked 4th full PPR. Hall was ranked 8th. Both players projected 18 to 17. Didn't come close. Trade Hall for CMC. Largely speaking, we don't know what the hex is going to happen on a week-to-week basis, Jesse. It's been pretty mixed. I will say Jordan Mason had 14 carries for 89 yards, so this was a really strong game. He just unfortunately didn't get any receiving work. If you're in a league that scores catches, and he didn't score a touchdown. This is a really frustrating thing that exists with running backs. I feel like maybe we should get extra bonuses for every certain amount of yards over 70 or something, because when they put up these big games where they clearly carried and were super important part of the offense, but don't score a touchdown, and so they only get you like 9 or 10 fantasy points, it's pretty frustrating. I will agree with you there. So yeah, tough. Breece Hall, the concerns there are a little bit worse. He has been very disappointing the past several weeks. As I mentioned above, Braylon Allen is involved. This offense seems to want to throw the ball a lot more, or need to throw the ball a lot more than run it. London game against the Vikings, they threw the ball 54 times and rushed it just 16 total. And 5 of those were Braylon Allen. So if you do the math, that leaves 9 carries for Breece Hall, which sucks. And he had only 3 catches for 14 yards, which isn't enough in a game where the Jets are throwing 54 times. It's really tough to trade Breece Hall right now because he's not going to go for the value that you drafted him at. So that makes it difficult to answer your question. Additionally, you asked specifically, should you train for CMC, who we don't know when is going to return from injury. It could be 2 weeks. It could be 2 months. It's really, really impossible to know right now. The nice thing there is that You have Jordan Mason, so you basically have an RB1 rest of like a guaranteed RB1 rest of season between those two guys. But right now, I'm assuming you're starting Mason and Hall, which means you have two quote unquote RB1s. Obviously, Brees Hall not playing at that level in too many games these days. I would, if you're going to trade away Brees Hall, I think I would try to do something different. Maybe get CMC plus a short-term RB that you can continue starting, like Chuba Hubbard. Although Jonathan Brooks is getting very close to returning, it sounds like, or a receiver, so that you're starting something startable. That's CMC is not might not be startable for a month. I don't really love that. Obviously, Brees Hall's maybe worse than no starter because he's putting up bad points while locking in a starter role. But I think things should get better for him. He's way too talented. This offense, maybe we'll see the Falcons thing from the Jets sometime soon. Maybe Devontae Adams will be the linchpin to that, where they suddenly kick it into gear and the Achilles injured quarterback suddenly breaks out. Although Rodgers has been not terrible the past few weeks, despite throwing 3 interceptions on Sunday morning. But yeah, I don't think I'm making this trade. I don't think it's too easy to trade Hall right now. But if you've got some other offers coming, feel free to hit me up. Discord AMA tomorrow night, or you can find me on Twitter. Yeah, it's a tough situation, Jesse. Mr. Nice Guy says, I am not sure what Mr. Nice Guy says. This is barely English, but I will read it. Because when Bigsby is, I'd thinking throw leaving lane wide open. Mr. Nice Guy, if you'd like to clarify what you meant there, I would love to comment. I assume that it's something about Tank Bigsby and his big plays on wide open fields. Also, shout out Creed with lanes wide open. Zorro19 says, picked up Tank last week and kept him on my bench. Yeah, that is unfortunate. Well, it's not that unfortunate. He ended up having that huge of a game. Keep him on your bench for now. And then Zorro19 follows up by saying, should I drop Hopkins or Ridley for Myers? They're both butt, lol. Ooh, this is interesting. Yes, I think I would, especially having both. That's kind of frustrating because you're never going to start both these guys in the same offense. Yes, I would drop one of these guys for Jacoby Myers. If it's full PPR, I would make it Ridley. If it's no PPR, I would make it Hopkins. And if it's half PPR, I would make it Ridley in terms of who you're dropping to add Jacoby Myers. Rob says, I sold high for weeks and I was able to buy low a lot. Now this is my 4-1 team. Hurts, Barkley, JT, Connor Chubb, AJ Brown, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, BTJ, Laporta, and Tucker Kraft. My work is done here. No question, just a brag. Word, Rob. We appreciate your brag. And you know what? If you did all this through the excellent advice of 4for4 Fantasy Football, then shout out 4for4. D-Flex says, thoughts on this trade? Giving away Achane, and then there is a bunch of characters that I have no idea what they mean. McBride for Gibbs and Goddard. I wonder if that's like the ampersand. So I'm assuming that you're giving away Achane and McBride for Gibbs and Goddard because that would be the only thing that's fair here. That is tough. Achane got hurt this past week, so I don't even know if whoever you're attempting to make this trade with will do it with you. Goddard is playing pretty well, but worth noting that AJ Brown and Devontae Smith have been out, so he may become a little bit less effective down the stretch. I think this is going to depend on the Achane injury news. If he's going to be back soon, I don't think I do this because I prefer McBride to Goddard, and Achane is in a similar sphere as Jahmyr Gibbs, especially if Tua comes back in a few weeks, which is rumored to be possible. However, if the Achane injury news is of even a little bit of concern, gonna miss a couple weeks or whatever, I'd probably go ahead and do this because Jahmyr Gibbs is what Achane should be, basically, but not injured. And Goddard is a pretty solid tight end. So I think he can make up the gap that Gibbs has over Achane if Achane is going to miss time or play in a bad offense for a while. Card Chisel came in after we answered the question. It says, okay, bunch of laughing, crying faces. Sounds good. Thank you. You're welcome, Card Chisel. That's what this Q&A is for. Kyle Strobel says, should I trade away Chris Godwin plus Ramondre Stevenson for Jonathan Taylor plus Cortland Sutton? No. You follow up by saying RB2 is Najee / Stevenson, and my wide receivers are Tyreek, Cup, Debo, Deontay, JSN. That's a nice wide receiver core once everybody is healthy and or Tua Tagovailoa is healthy. But no, you're not doing this trade. I don't like Cortland Sutton at all. I think he is a trap, and I don't want to start him ever. Well, meanwhile, Chris Godwin is one of the best wide receivers in fantasy. And Ramondre, despite the fact that he was supposed to, quote-unquote, get benched and, quote-unquote, not be the starter anymore, neither of those are actual quotes, by the way, he was the lead back against the Dolphins, 12 carries for 89 yards and a touchdown. So, and 4 catches for 3 yards. So, Ramondre, and that was a good matchup, the Dolphins. So, it was maybe expected that Ramondre would be good, but he held on to his clear lead RB role despite the rumors of being bounced for his fumble issues. So no, I'm not doing this. Edwin Ramos asks, does the matchup favor Olave getting 11.2 fantasy points in full PPR tonight? A nice little Monday Night Football question. How fun is that? If anyone's got any other Monday Night Football questions, feel free to throw them in. Since we record this on Monday, most people would listen to it on Monday. But if you listen to it tomorrow and my answer is wrong, skip this part. I will say yes, Olave can get 11.2 fantasy points in full PPR. I think the Saints will have to throw against a Chiefs team that is heavily favored. Edwin Ramos also asks, slim pickings for defense next week, can only drop Tracy, but how can I after that performance? You can Edwin, because Devin Singletary should be back, I believe. Definitely double check the news on that before you make any moves, but I believe the Singletary injury was expected to be very short term, and Tyrone Tracy will go back to being a handcuff who carries some interest now and some upside based off what we saw in week 1, in week 5. It was really, really nice, obviously, and if you picked him up and started him, that's pretty sweet. But I don't mind dropping him for a defense if you absolutely have to. I'd be curious who you would be playing if you don't pick someone up. But yeah, doable. Lee Ving asks, who else fell for the Wix cheese? Me and many, many other people, Lee, but I will point out the process was kind of right because he led the team with 7 targets. It was just a complete lack of connection between him and Jordan Love, and I think some bad drops that led to just 2 catches. So, woof. William E. says, I have Stroud. Is Cousins worth a spot as a backup? Depends on your bench depth, William. I don't really look to carry a backup quarterback in shallow leagues if I have a good starter and you have a good starter. But if you're in a 12, 14 team league and you've got 7, 8, 9 bench spots, then yes, I would love to have a good, viable, streamable, playable if something happens to Stroud or it's his bye week QB. And Kirk Cousins is all of that. I think he and the offense are getting better and should be strong moving forward. Pinoy Pens says, Tyjae Spears is available in my league. Would you drop Irving or Allen for him? Ooh, that is a really interesting one. Let me briefly take a quick gander at the overall rostership here. So Tyjae is rostered in 59% of Yahoo leagues, and Braylon and Bucky are both a little less than that. So essentially, none of these guys should be available. I'm going to say no, unless you're starting Ty Spears on a frequent basis, which I doubt. I'd rather have either of these guys for the upside. I don't think Ty Spears has the same upside as them because I don't think he has as much chance of just being an RB1 or taking the RB1 role should something happen to the starter. But they should all be rostered. So if you can you drop someone else and pick up Ty Spears? Because if so, I would. Tyler Sperry says Dell hasn't done anything. That is mostly true, except that once again, Nico Collins got hurt and Dell became pretty involved with Nico Collins leaving the game. So you're going to need to have him. He goes on to say even when Collins was out, that's not true. He was involved when Collins was out. He didn't put up many fantasy points, but he was involved. And if Nico Collins misses games, Tank Dell should get schemed in a little more. He is extremely talented, and we saw him have great fantasy performances last year when Nico Collins was out. So he's not droppable. I mean, unless you're in an 18 league and, Darnell Mooney is out there, I'd probably rather have Darnell Mooney. But unless there's something crazy like that, Tank Dell's not droppable. 9-Ball Bori says, I have Kyron on a bye and Moss may miss games and Chase Brown. RB depth is bad for me. Would you be spending 15 to 20% on Bigsby when you know some league mates want him as well? Yes, you can do that. I have him at 9 to 10% fab bid, but if you're in a bad situation like you are and you know that people are going to be battling for him, Tank Bigsby is the kind of guy that I am willing to spend up for a decent number. So I've mentioned several times on this pod that I go pretty conservative in the waiver column because I don't like blowing fab on what ends up being, a flash in the pan player, which happens way too often. I don't think Tank Bigsby is a flash in the pan player, and I don't think that this fab is too extreme on him. So yes, I think you can go 15 to 20% to get him. Edwin Ramos says, anyone ever say you look like Paxton Lynch? I have never gotten that in my entire life. I assume that would be primarily related to the mustache. But you know what? After pulling up a picture, I actually see it quite a bit, and I'm going to take it because he's a pretty good-looking guy. Hopefully, my waiver wire advice is better than Paxton Lynch's quarterbacking. Let's just throw that out there. Ian Clark says, Aaron Rodgers and Drake London for Ramondre Stevenson and Baker Mayfield. This is a trade question. I would be receiving Rodgers and London. This is a 16-team league, and my starting QB is Anthony Richardson. So you're downgrading a quarterback because Baker Mayfield is better than Aaron Rodgers to go from Ramondre Stevenson to Drake London. I think that probably depends a little bit on what your running back versus wide receiver situation looks like. If you are set at running back and hurting at wide receiver, which I think is unlikely in a 16-team league, I would make this move potentially. We're talking if you're in real trouble at wide receiver and Ramondre is like your RB5. Given the fact that I don't think that's likely, I don't think I'm making this trade. Running back is a tougher position to come by, and Baker Mayfield is a better quarterback. Also, Anthony Richardson is not your starting quarterback. Baker Mayfield is your starting quarterback. Even if Anthony Richardson is healthy, I'd prefer to start Baker Mayfield. He should be a perma start at this point. Jesse Driscoll said, I'm being sarcastic, brother. You're one of my favorite fantasy guys. Hang with week to week. What's your Twitter handle? It is at Matt Okada. Literally just my name. MattOkada. Thank you. I appreciate the compliment. And I believe your sarcasm was over is it safe to say we don't know what the heck is happening? Listen, that's more true than it should be because week to week, it's really hard to tell. Rob says, thanks at 444 for all the help and advice, and then super chats just thanks for the advice. Thank you, Rob, for being here, for asking questions, and for listening to this show and any others at 444 that you listen to. We really appreciate having you, and we wouldn't have these without you all being here, listening, and dropping these super chats in. Which, by the way, anyone else who wants to throw in there, feel free to. Harpreet Danoa Hopefully I pronounced that right. Throw a pronunciation rating out of 10 in the chat, Harpreet. Says, would you trade Stevenson for Dowdle and Singletary? Why are there so many Ramondre Stevenson trade questions this week? I am curious to know. Like, legitimately, I think we've had 3 or 4 at this point. Would I trade Stevenson for Dowdle and Singletary? If you don't have any starting running backs and Dowdle and Singletary would both become starting running backs, I don't hate this because you're trading a low-end RB2 starter for a low-end RB2 starter, potentially high-end RB3 in Dowdle, and essentially another one of those types of players in Devin Singletary. So for a lot of teams, this would be getting 2 starting fantasy running backs for 1 and not even dropping that far from Stevenson to whichever of these guys is better on a weekly basis. So I would make that move. Again, if both these guys are going to be starting for you. If one of them is going to be in your lineup and the other one's going to be on your bench every week, or if both are going to be on your bench, I'm absolutely not making this move. But I doubt that's the case. Jesse Driscoll came in again with a Monday Night Football question. I have Kamara and Olave and Carr having a great game. Xavier and Kelsey bust tonight. Thank you for your advice, Jesse. I would appreciate a Rashid Shaheed game because I have him going multiple places, including the Scott Fish Bowl. And I also would appreciate a return touchdown by Mecole Hardman because I am starting him in the Scott Fish Bowl. I really don't know if Kelsey busts tonight. I think he might get 8-9 targets. That should be the case for the Chiefs moving forward with Rashee Rice out, I believe. But I like the rest of your input here. Hopefully we see just a great game overall. FC Barcelona 4 says, safe to drop Keon Coleman. Yes, Keon Coleman was in my drop list in the article last week. And I know he had one huge play this past week, but on Sunday, but he looks useless. And this was a game with Khalil Shakir out, and he still was not particularly good outside of that one catch. He had 5 targets. The other 4 targets, he had 0 catches. So, yeah, you can drop Keon Coleman. Edwin Ramos says, who would you target to consolidate the skill player room? Oh, boy. QB, Allen. Wide receiver, Olave, Godwin, Reed, Flowers, Downs. JSN. Running back, Taylor, Gibbs, Robbins. I assume that means Dobbins. Trey Sermon, Tyrone Tracy. Tight end, Kincaid, Kraft, and Hawkinson. Holy cannoli. I would probably try to consolidate to get a better wide receiver because you have a million wide receiver 2s, but no legitimate wide receiver 1. Given your depth at wide receiver and also the fact that you have 3 potentially good tight ends, I would maybe try something like trading Kincaid and Olave or Flowers for a legitimate wide receiver 1, like maybe Nico Collins or Justin Jefferson, or Malik Neighbors might be an interesting one because he's injured. Or try to go get Brian Thomas Jr. You heard what I said earlier in the show. Try to go get Brian Thomas Jr. You might even be able to make a straight up trade with one of these plays or one of these players for Brian Thomas Jr. Maybe one of your tight ends because you have 3 startable tight ends once Hawkinson is back. Edwin Ramos says, handsome dude for sure. I'm going to assume that means me, not Paxton Lynch. Just kidding. But thank you, Edwin, for all these compliments and questions. And Pinoy Pens with currently what is the last question in the chat, unless someone else drops one in before I finish answering this one. Any tight ends worth picking up? I started Njoku, but he is hurt. Gesicki, Parkinson, Otten, Schultz, and Hill are available in my league. Well, Pinoy Pens, if you subscribe at 4for4.com using the promo code YouTube for 25% off, you will see all the tight ends that I recommend adding this week. There are 2 of them that are particularly worth adding, and one of them you named in your list. Another one is a particular AFC East tight end. And yes, I am teasing all of this instead of giving you a direct answer because you really should go and subscribe to 4for4 and check out the article. I put in many, many hours to writing that article each week, and it's got all of the goodness that would answer these questions. But to be very straightforward with you, yes, you should pick up at least one, maybe two, maybe three of these guys with Njoku battling injury. Although Njoku was back this week. I don't know if he got re-injured. Maybe I missed that, but he was back and was not very effective. Maybe he did get re-injured because Jordan Akins ended up getting 3 catches on 3 targets for 22 yards. I may have missed that. You know what? Let's look it up right now before I go around giving silly advice. I don't see. Nope, he hurt his knee in the week 5 loss. Okay. Yep. Yeah, you got to go pick up one of these tight ends. And the priority order is in the waiver wire column. So do it. Wow, we had several more questions while I was reading through that one. Edwin says, who do you consider true rock and roll wide receiver 1 types rest of season? Good question. Let's see. I will read through the highest scorers and name the ones that I think are true wide receiver 1s. Jamar Chase, Nico Collins if healthy, Justin Jefferson, Jaden Reed, Malik Neighbors, Chris Godwin. Brian Thomas Jr. is close, but I don't think he will legitimately be a wide receiver 1, though he could be. Wide receiver 2 range for sure. Mike Evans is in the conversation. CeeDee Lamb should be in the conversation, but has been disappointing. Amon-Ra St. Brown should certainly be in the conversation. Beyond that, it's tough. Has not been super consistent. But those are the names. FC Barcelona 4 says, joined stream late, need RB help next week. Trey Sermon or Tracy. Bigsby and Tank not available. If none of the guys in the column are available, I will, and both of the starters for Trey Sermon and Tyrone Tracy, aka Jonathan Taylor and Devin Singletary, are out. Let's look at the matchups real quick. Trey Sermon gets the Titans, and Tyrone Tracy gets. Why can I not find the Giants on this screen? Oh, the Bengals. I will take Tyrone Tracy there. I really don't trust Trey Sermon at all. Edwin Ramos, to your question, your continued wide receiver 1 question, looking like Tyreek Hill is the best guy can get for the cheapest. That is true, but that's because he's not a locked and loaded rock and roll wide receiver 1 for as long as Tua is out, unfortunately. Jesse, John Daigle was with 4-for-4 last year, I believe. He has moved to different pastures. Everybody moves around in the fantasy football industry quite a lot. And FC Barcelona 4, with what again will be the last question unless someone pops in. Need a filler RB this week. Trey Sermon. Oh, you asked the same question but worded differently. So I answered that. Any others off waivers? Yes, there are some other running backs worth picking up off waivers. Check out the article at 4for4.com/plans. Edwin came in and said, thinking Hill or Lamb is the target. My league is stingy and will only sell top guys extremely low. Lamb might be the best target, Edwin, because he has been one of the most underperforming who it doesn't really make sense that he's underperforming and could suddenly turn it on and be what he should have been, which is like the number 1 or number 2 wide receiver overall. So, yeah, I like that being the target. Okay, that is the Waiver Wire Show. Thank you all for being here, for your questions. Thanks for listening if you're listening on the pod after the fact. I hope we have a great Monday Night Football game tonight. It feels like it could be a banger between the Saints and Chiefs. And if you're in the Discord, which if you're not, you should be, super cool place to get tons of extra good info and AMAs, like the one with me tomorrow night, right before waivers run, where we answer a bunch more questions. So hop in there. Super, super fun community to be a part of. And I will see you on Friday with John Paulson on the Most Accurate Podcast. Until then, adios. Good luck. May your fab bids be perfectly calculated, and I will see you next week.